Welcome to Tuesday at 2. Tuesday at 2. Today, we are all about online advertising, from getting spotted with pay-per-click, also known as PPC, and to understand just how advertising works with search engines like Google and Bing. So today's speaker, Stephanie Potter from Spotter Advertising, will teach and inspire us how to grow our business.
Welcome to the It's Better Together podcast, where intelligent conversations turn dreams
into action.
With hosts Marcy Stout and Allison Nissen. Each episode highlights inspirational women and practical business advice from the Rebel Coach Tuesday at 2 live programs.
Hello and welcome, Stephanie Potter. We are so glad to have you here. I want to know, I'm just going to jump right in here. You started Spotter Advertising not too long ago. You had left your corporate career. How did you come up with the idea of the name and what you were going to do, and just jump right in? I love it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So yeah, actually Spotter is going to turn 3 in July, which is crazy. And yeah, I was at an agency here in Houston, and I learned, that's basically where I learned paid search. But I was doing about 4 years prior to that. I was in just different marketing jobs, and I just hadn't felt like I had found the one, essentially. So I'd been at the agency for almost 4 years, and I'm not gonna lie, I had a family member of mine kind of asking me and suggesting to me for a good year or so. He was like, my brother-in-law actually, he was like, he's an entrepreneur himself in Austin, and he kept saying, hey, can you do what you're doing on your own? And I was like, no way. And he would always ask me why. And eventually that question, he didn't ask it just once, he asked it several times. And eventually that really started to, it just started to grow on me. I started to really, really think about it. So once I was at the agency for a long enough time, and I thought about that question, like, can I do this on my own? I really just started to make a list. I was like, okay, let's take the whole client experience, and I'll get to what I do here in a little bit, but I'll take the whole client experience and look at it from the very beginning to getting them on board and getting them doing advertising for them. And I just wrote it down, and I just had to literally just write down, like, what can I do at this time? What do I need to teach myself, and what am I missing? And so it just kind of started from there. But yeah, I was at the agency for almost 4 years, and I just finally took the leap and said, look, I can do this. And it doesn't hurt that my parents are entrepreneurs. My brother-in-law, like I mentioned, is an entrepreneur. So I definitely have some great foundation that I came from that helped me get started in terms of like guiding me. It was not handed to me. I didn't just, go in and buy the domain, pre-built, and the website pre-built. So it definitely took some work, but yeah, it really just took a big leap of faith. And I remember calling my stepdad and asking him, like, hey, I'm not really asking him. Well, I kind of did. I just said, I had this really crazy idea. You're going to think I'm crazy, but I want to start my own business. And he didn't laugh at me. And he just said, all right, like, well, come to me when you're ready and tell me your business plan, and like, let's go. So I'm just very thankful that I have the support system that I do to have been able to start Spotter. But it really just took took some courage and some grit, and here we are. It's almost 3 years old. I can't believe it. So yeah.
Well, congratulations. That's an awesome
Thank
story.
you.
We always love, like, it feels to me that when somebody has this idea of going out on their own, or somebody's admiring somebody else that goes out on their own, it's like this, it seems so large, but it's like everybody, there's such a similar theme towards two things that you said. One, it starts with just making a list.
Right.
Like, what would I do to get started? And then reaching out to somebody to help either mentor you or just kind of build your support. So I love your story, and I can't wait to hear more about what the business is and what Spotter does.
Yeah, exactly. I just started writing. I mean, I'm a list person to begin with, so I just started writing down what it is that I would, even just from the basics of, okay, how am I going to get paid? Like, how do I physically do that transaction? And, where do I do my banking, and who's going to help me with my taxes? Just all these things. But once you start sitting there and going through the list, it just becomes more possible. I know it sounds a little cheesy, but it just has to start somewhere. And so I just started going through the list and figuring out, okay, what do I not understand who do I need to ask what question. I still have all the documents, so it's kind of funny when I go back and I find it on my my saved Excel docs, and I see my list of things I had to do to get to, and buying a computer was number one. So taking out a little loan from my business. So anyways, yeah, it was a fun start, and I never regret any of it. It's been a really fun journey.
That's great. Well, why don't we
Yeah.
start with sharing us what Spotter does and what kind
Okay.
of your niche is?
Sure. Yes. So whenever you go on, let's just say you probably have your phone right next to you, and let's say you're looking for, let's do a search for your local, like you need to get your oil changed. That's something I need to go do, and you'll get my my sticker, you know, do my expiration and all that. So if you get on your phone and you do a search for oil change near me, so that's something that's a B2C type ad, but still, you're gonna get on Google and you're gonna do a search, and the first thing you may or may not realize, you're shown ads right away. That's how Google makes all their money, are through those ads. So that's what I do for my clients. I get my clients to show up online. Doesn't matter what my client does, what kind of service they offer, if they make widgets, if they make screws, if they are a service provider, if they're a manufacturer. It could be a doctor's office. It doesn't matter what you do. As long as you have a website, I can send traffic to your site. And so how I do that is I create ads, and we bid on them within Google. Google AdWords is a bidding auction essentially, and just about any keyword you can, or any phrase you can think of that you'd want to show up on Google for, you can, as long as you want to pay for it. So that's essentially what I do. I help my clients grow their business via paid ads on Google and Bing. And I also do some LinkedIn advertising for a few of my clients as well. That's really fun. It's a little more expensive. The cost per conversion is a little higher, but it's very targeted, and it's a very fun space to advertise if you have the dollars to do so. But my niche is Google ads and Bing ads, and getting my clients to grow their business via clicks. So it's really, really exciting due to all the tracking tools that Google and the search engines now have these days. We can identify, going back to the exact search query that someone typed into Google, how that conversion or prospect came to be. So if someone came to your site today through a specific term and you have your tracking, everything is tracking, and you have AdWords and Google Analytics connected, I can tell you a week or two down the road when we're having it, let's say you're my client and we're meeting as our monthly review, we can go back in time and see the query that, you know, Joe Schmo typed in on Google to find your website, and eventually submitted a form, or you'll had a conversation or whatever happened. We can find what they exactly typed into Google. So pretty cool. A little creepy, but it's all good. It's not really creepy. It's exciting to get to see how people are searching for different things.
So is it worth an entrepreneur's time to try to
Yeah.
figure out what those searches are that pull up your competitors' websites to help you? How would you use those?
Sure. So that's actually a very frequent question I get time to time from when I'm just doing different prospect calls, or even just my current clients. They'll ask, well, if this is the keyword list we're bidding on, and these are the terms we're trying to get to show up for, can you tell me what my clients are bidding on? And the simple answer is, no, I can't. That information is not shared. I can't go into AdWords and figure out what my competitors across Houston are bidding on for. Like, let's just take Spotter, for example. There are hundreds, thousands of agencies here in town that are bidding on similar terms that I'd want to show up for. For example, like Houston Paid Search Services or Houston Paid Search Agency. I cannot go find what they are bidding on just by opening up a certain tab or looking at a certain website. However, I can do investigative work, and I can get on Google and I can just search term after term and see what different websites are showing up for different search terms. So I can easily go into Google right now and do a search for Houston PPC agency, like I just mentioned, and I'll see several websites pop up. So it's kind of like just some investigative work. You can just work backwards and type in the searches yourself. But also in the beginning process, when I have a new client and we're figuring out okay, well, what keywords are we going to go bid on? Because that's my job to do for my clients. I learn their business. I ask my clients 10, 20 different questions about their prospects they're looking for, their perfect prospect, and just different aspects about the business. Then I go do research on competitors, and I go into AdWords, and I do a lot of different research on, there's a few different, and I don't want to get too technical because I don't want to confuse anybody that's listening, but in AdWords, you're able to look at different keyword forecasts and look at different prices on keywords. So I use that platform a lot to just see what other competitors are probably bidding on. And again, it's not going to tell me that, okay, this client is bidding on this term, but I'll see that certain terms are more competitive and they have a higher cost per click than others. And that tells me that it's most likely used across the competitors in your space. So I don't know if that answered it clear enough, but I think. So does that help? Okay. Cool.
So I'd love to know, like, so when a lot of our members are within their first 3 years of being an entrepreneur. So, let's just say the entrepreneurial journey, you're going to have like peaks and valleys with your income when you're in the very early stages. Help us understand like when to invest in a service like an advertising, like your service, or when you should have enough kind of cash flow and you should, kind of be at a certain level to talk with you.
So great question. I have worked with, just to give some of my experience, that's what I can really go off of, right? Is what I personally know, what I know to have worked. I think that if you have a solid, I'm just going to go ahead and start with like, let's just say, it's kind of hard to answer that question because I don't know what everyone is comfortable with their marketing budget looks like, but I definitely can say that you can't, in my opinion, you can't grow your business without putting something into it. So I definitely think that it's something needed. I would say after at least being in business for a year, because you know what your ideal prospect looks like. I wouldn't jump into AdWords in the very beginning of a new business because you still may not know, what's our reach going to be? How far out do we want to bring customers in from? Are we going to stay in the local area? Are we going to branch out to the whole state? So I think it takes time. So I would say after being in business for at least a solid year and understanding what your ideal prospect looks like, who are your competitors? Do you have a good website? You definitely don't want to start advertising if your website is not ready to accept. Oh, sorry. All right, we have a 100-pound lab that thinks he has to tell me when someone's here. We have Amazon delivery. Sorry. So and then in terms of budget, this is again where it gets a little tricky for me to give my suggestion because I have a certain minimum budget that I work with now. From being in business now for 3 years, I have the ability I've had the ability to increase my minimum budget to a certain amount. But at the very beginning of a business, if I go back to like when I started Spotter, I know that I wouldn't have my minimum budget to start a monthly paid search budget, but you can start with smaller budgets is where I'm trying to go. So I would say that if someone was comfortable spending at least $1,000 a month in Google Ads and they were comfortable knowing what kind of prospect they're looking for, I think starting with some kind of budget is better than nothing. Mm-hmm. Because if you're not out there advertising somehow, no one's going to learn about you unless you're doing a lot of, word of mouth and, other people are referring you, which is great. But I hope that helps. I would suggest at least waiting a whole year until you really have your website is ready to go. You've got good content on your site. People can contact you. Is there a form? Is there your phone number? You understand your competitors, different things like that. And then also I would say at least having, comfortably, I would suggest spending about $2,000 a month on Google Ads, but it also depends on your industry's budget and how competitive it is, because something like Revel Coach may not be near as competitive as some of my clients here, some of my manufacturers here in Houston that are manufacturing steel are like a steel supplier. That's so competitive. Well, I say so competitive, relatively speaking. So sorry, I'm trying to give a lot of information. I hope I'm answering the question correctly, but it would just depend. And if anybody has any questions, I would be happy to talk to them about, if anybody wants to reach out and wants to explain, like, this is where I'm with my business. This is what I'm comfortable spending on a monthly basis. Like, what's your suggestion? I'm happy to have a one-on-one conversation because I'm happy to share what I know to help anybody.
And Stephanie, that's one thing we love whenever we're getting to know our speakers, like you can totally tell, like you're the type of person that actually is, I'm willing to talk to you about your business and, share
Yeah.
ideas and things like that. So we appreciate you offering that.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Because I know and that's one of the things that I have on my notes, because that's what I do. I took notes before the call. But if someone were to ask me, what have you learned, or what would you tell yourself, 5-10 years ago, and it's just to not be afraid to ask those questions, because I'm always so embarrassed by the amount of questions I can ask people or ask, a stranger or whatever the case might be. I'm just always so curious, but I would go back in time and tell myself, I know I'm asking myself this own question, but I would go back in time and tell myself not to be embarrassed to ask the questions. So for anybody out there who may have questions for me, I am happy to ask, because you never know unless you ask. And my mom used to always tell me the answer is no unless you ask, or until you ask. So
that's so good. Well, our mom, to share the kind of same story as our mom used to say, she who asks the most questions wins.
I like that one too. I'm going to add it to my list. I like that.
So in the theme of Alice and I growing up with the mother we nicknamed Miss Questions, I do have a couple more questions.
Yeah. Yes.
So what about, okay, so I'm starting to understand your process of how you can manipulate words and help your clients understand which words and buying and bidding and all that. What about your expectations on their website? Like, I know you don't do SEO or like the organic SEO, but is that important that there's words that are matching on their website to the advertising? Is that what's kind of like the expectation on the company side with their online presence?
Sure. So I have worked with very rich content websites, and then websites that don't have much at all. So, and we can bring traffic to any kind of website. So from my viewpoint, I think it's best just to get started. And then as we get started, you can build on your site as you go. So I wouldn't be afraid to start advertising for a certain prospect, even if they had if it wasn't very robust of a site. I would still say, okay, well, let me still learn about you and learn about the business, and let's just at least get things going, and we can learn how people are searching for you. And then let's line up with how they're searching with what's on your site and what's not. So as far as expectations go, it's definitely a part of the conversation when I'm meeting with a prospect and I have their website up and we're looking at it. I would say I'm actually pretty impressed with just about every prospect that I've met with in my last 2+ years of being in business. Everybody's sites these days, I feel like business owners have really gotten the point that you have to have a legitimate, a welcoming, warm site, or else people are going to log in or click on the ad and then go right back to Google and try again. Because nowadays, since websites have gotten so good, that we're so used to that, and we're used to that instant satisfaction. So I really haven't had to have like a stern conversation with a prospect and say, you need to work on your site before I can come on board. So I guess it really just comes down to I give suggestions, and a part of my monthly review process is we not only look at the paid search data, but we also look at the site, and I'll give suggestions in terms of adding content to a specific page if they don't have enough information around a certain product they have, or a certain service. Or I'll say, look, here are the trends from last month or the last quarter's queries. We don't have any of that information on the website. So that's my suggestion to you, to add a paragraph or two. And sometimes it just takes bullet pointing some information out for clients, and then they just take it to their site and they add it in. You just have to lay it out for them, because some people, they're terrified. I mean, not terrified, but people, I think it's so daunting to have to write content. I mean, it's not fun, I'll admit. But yeah, sometimes if you just lay it out for your client, they are my clients, and they typically are more willing to go and add it to the site. But yeah, that's a really good question, because it does matter a lot on the SEO side. Content is king. I would remind everybody of that. Google loves content. They love rich content websites. If you have a bunch of information about what you do, what you service, and you don't have to go overboard. You don't want to keyword stuff and just repeat the same thing over and over. But Google loves content, so it's going to help you out on the SEO side. And if anybody doesn't know what SEO means, search engine optimization, which is a whole other can of worms that someone else can get into one day. But I know enough to talk about it and to help a client and to direct them in the right direction, but that's not what I do and help. But I still, going back to your question, it's a great one, because it's always going to help our user experience, and we're going to have a higher likelihood of conversion on the website if it is a good site. So there's a lot more details I could get into, but I'll try and stay kind of surface level so I don't get too in the weeds there.
Well, it's great because what I love about it, your service, is that, you have like your role in itself,
Mhm.
like conversions through the advertisements getting to your site. But because you live in this space all the time, you actually can just give that consultative recommendation to your client that they can do something, and that just simplifies it, because you're right. A lot of people like us don't like doing the content on the website, which is why we have sisters like Allison that are good writers.
Well, and exactly. And I would be doing a disservice to my clients if I wasn't doing that consultative side, because if I was just sending people to your website without giving you any advice or giving you any feedback, then we would most likely see a poor conversion rate. So if I'm not suggesting what can be done, how can we do better, what can we do to make Google want to show our ad more often, then again, I would be doing a disservice to my clients, because I mean, they are giving me the opportunity to spend their marketing dollars to get people to their site. So if I'm going to send people to their site through these ads, and they're just going to come to the site and backclick and go to the next one, we just wasted $2.50 or $8.75, depending on what the bid is. So I think that taking it very personally is a bad thing, but it also is a good thing, and it helps me with my clients, and it's a strong suit, even though it is not so great all the time. But I care about my clients, and I care about their business, because their wins are my wins. And I know it's really cheesy, but they're not going to stick around and keep me doing advertising for them if I'm not bringing them any traffic at all, and if not the right traffic. So it's a win for me if we get a conversion and their business is growing, because they're going to keep me around. So yeah.
Absolutely. What has been the biggest challenge in the role that you've taken on as CEO, president, chief marketer?
Right, chief financial operator.
Exactly.
Gosh, there's a few, and I thought about this one. The first thing I wrote down was battling with Google, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds here and confuse anybody, but Google is changing our search landscape all the time, whether or not people realize it or not. So as an advertiser, and I am, they're the big dogs. Google ads are the big dogs. We've got Bing ads as well. We've got LinkedIn, and we have a couple other platforms, but Google is they're a monopoly. Everybody goes to Google, and everybody bids on their platform. So they can do anything, and they can make any changes they want. People are still going to use their platform to advertise. So that kind of hurts, and it's a challenge, and I'll explain why. For just one example, about, was it 7 years ago, 7 years ago, they took away the ability for us to see what people were typing. I say they. In Google Analytics, we're able to see a bunch of data. And about 7 years ago, they changed it so that we couldn't see how people were organically searching in Google. They say due to security reasons. So if you were to go into Google and just search, what is this red, they would just say like the searches we're doing on Google are too private for anybody in analytics to see. Sure. Okay. That's fine. But then about, I think it was like last year, they announced that they were going to start taking away. So, okay, let me go back up a second. So that was organic. There, you've got organic and you have paid search traffic. And what I run is paid search traffic. And in analytics, even though 7 years ago they made that change on the organic side, one beautiful thing about paid search, and I remember being at my old agency, and that's one of the selling points of paid search, is we can see all the queries. I can tell you, Marcy, I can tell you, Allison, I can tell you what people are searching in Google to find your website. And if you're doing paid ads, well, we were able to use, say we as in paid search advertisers, we were able to use that weapon, going into a conversation about why someone should use paid search. Well, Google last year decided to take away some of the queries that they were collecting in analytics. They were gonna take some back, not take them away, but not show. They weren't going to be as open with all the queries as they used to. They were going to start peeling them back. And they said it again for, I don't know if they necessarily said privacy reasons, but I remember them saying that they were just going to hold back unless there were several searches around the same query, they were going to start holding them back. So anyway, sorry, long answer to your question. And it's probably really boring for some people who don't understand the search landscape, but why it's a challenge is because if they continue to go down this road and just continue to take things away from us as paid search advertisers, it's going to really change my role for my clients. And, you know, it's fine. I'm going to pivot and I'm going to adapt because that's, you know, that's what life's about. And it's, you know, I'll welcome the challenge, but I would say Google itself, it's kind of a love-hate relationship that it's kind of a challenge just because I have to learn with, that was just one example too, them taking away some of the queries that we're able to see. And if someone may be thinking, well, why are the queries so important? That's how I'm learning for all of my clients, how people are finding their services or their products. People don't just go in and say stainless steel widget. People are typing in all sorts of details about these widgets, whether it's a 304 stainless steel or it's for a certain machine, you know, and you would be surprised by how detailed people get in their queries. And now with voice search, we can see what people are like, okay, Google, please tell me where I can find yada, yada, yada. So all of those queries are so important to someone like me and the role that I have and the way I can refine programs is through the queries. So sorry, really long answer and probably boring for a lot of people, but that's a challenge for me. And I'm passionate about it because I do love what I do and I don't want it to be taken away from me. And every time I meet with Google reps, I'm like, y'all aren't taking that away from us, right? They're like, not that we can say. And so anyways, but on the more personal side, if you care for another part of that answer, when you talk about challenges, I would say one of the biggest challenges I faced for Spotter personally was being an entrepreneur and having a baby. You know, there's no book, there's no guide that tells you like how to do it right. And I mean, just being a mom and a parent in general, right? There's no perfect way and there's not really a manual that comes with it. But that was a big challenge. Last December, 2 Decembers ago, December 2019, we brought home our first child, our daughter, and I was running Spotter. So I came home from the hospital and I wasn't allowed to take my computer to the hospital, which was, you know, appropriate. But when I got home, I had to answer emails. And so here I am like in this like newborn fog and having to, you know, reply to people on the East Coast, people on the West Coast, and, you know, trying to keep Spotter afloat. And people knew that I had for about a week an away message that said, you know, welcoming a family, you know, welcoming our first child, you know, if I'm slow to respond, that's why. But I still had to answer my email. So that was a challenge, was bringing her home. I mean, it was the biggest blessing, but it was just a challenge, right? You have to like adapt, like I said earlier, and just figure out the new normal and figure out how to make it all work, especially with like barely any sleep those first 2 months. But anyways, it was a beautiful challenge, but it was definitely a challenge. So I think that's a big subject, right? For all of us females, especially, of how to be an entrepreneur and be a good mom at the same time. I think it only continues to grow, right? As they get older, we still have to juggle like how much time do I invest in work and how much time do I invest in being a mom? So
yeah, so that's one thing in my separate practice. I do the coaching, executive coaching for women within 18 months of maternity leave, but the key word is maternity leave.
right.
So a lot of my clients had 3 months, you know, with their baby, and just, I could only imagine, like as an entrepreneur, you really have to have that discipline of knowing how to turn it off or it's not just turning off the computer, it's physically removing yourself from the thoughts of working. So that must have been quite a challenge.
Yeah, 100%. And I know I'm not the only one out there that dealt with it and deals with it on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, I mean, it's not even just being an entrepreneur, right? It's like just women and I remember my mom like missing, you know, certain things when I was growing up, and never would I hold that against her. But I just remember because she was, you know, she's a business owner. She owns a tax firm. She and her husband, they own an accounting firm, but she was grinding. She was working sometimes, you know, 8 o'clock to 11 at night, you know, 8 in the morning to 11 at night, and, you know, sometimes later in busy season. So, I mean, I got to see it as a personal example, you know, growing up. So I've seen what hard work looks like, but I guess I'm just bringing that up because it's not just me, not just entrepreneurs. I feel like it's all women in the workforce that we're constantly having to find that balance of, you know, working hard and chasing those dreams, and then also being a good mom. How much time do you spend on each? So
Yeah, and
But,
it's
yeah.
definitely something, I mean, I feel like the conversation, it just keeps evolving. And even
Yeah.
right now, while everyone's working from home, there's such a different dynamics with the families, and employers are thinking differently. So it just, I feel like the platform of how to be successful as a working parent, because there's a lot of dads that really want to be engaged both at work and at
Absolutely.
home. So it's a great platform. So Stephanie, this is so
Yeah.
great to meet you. We appreciate your time today. And if
Yeah.
somebody does want to get in touch with you, what's the best approach? Where can we find you?
On my website, I have an email that's linked on there, and also my phone number is on there. So the phone number you see on my website, I mean, I can send it however you want, but it's on my website. I have an email and or there's like a contact form, but my phone number that's on the website is my personal cell. So if you call that number, you will be calling me. So.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
We hope everyone has a wonderful Tuesday. And with that, we'd like to say we'll see you next week.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having
stopping
me.
by. Lovely to meet you.
Nice to meet you guys. Thank you.
I'm trying. To watch a live Tuesday at 2 program with Revel Coach, visit us at revelcoach.com. Until next time. And we're done. That was good.
I was talking. Yeah, so